I've been wanting to ask you about this shocking story from the Netherlands where an idealistic project to house refugees and students together in a custom-built block became a nightmare of sexual assault and violence. The scheme placed 125 students alongside 125 refugees, with residents encouraged to form buddy partnerships to help migrants adjust to Dutch society. However, testimonies from former residents shared in an investigative documentary describe repeated sexual assaults, stalking and violent confrontations. And Douglas, this nightmare endured for years because everyone seemed to be so desperate for this pioneering project to work. And it immediately for me brought back the grooming gang scandal in the UK. Supposedly well-intentioned people turning a blind eye to just some horrific behaviour.
Yeah, I mean, this is reminiscent of that, and sadly of many other such cases, Rita. I mean, it reminds me of cases I wrote about in The Strange Death of Europe 10 years ago now, where, for instance, I mean, there was a case I mentioned where an aid worker who worked with refugees and encouraged open borders was herself raped by some so-called refugees, migrants, and was encouraged by her colleagues not to report it and indeed to cover it up so that the narrative held. And this story from the Netherlands is very similar to that. And I think it speaks to a really big problem in our time. You have to ask the question, how many, for instance, sexual assaults do you want to cover up in order to protect the narrative that you're pushing on the people? See, I would have thought the answer is none. I think that would be the obvious one. If you stick a bunch of students beside a large number of recently arrived males from other cultures who will not share the Dutch attitudes towards sex and much more, you are going to have problems. I would have thought that the moment that the first assault happened, you scrapped the experiment. But isn't it interesting, Rita, that in all of these cases, there seems to be this belief that the foundational I wouldn't say myth, but the foundational belief of the society has to be held to, even if a massive number of lives are ruined along the way. And I don't think that should be the deal. I think we should be able to pivot. We should be able to reverse mistakes. We should be able to alter the course we're on if the course we're on isn't working. But we'll see, maybe the Dutch authorities, like many of the British authorities and others in recent years, will decide that there is some permissible amount of rape that you can have in your societies in order to continue the shibboleths of our time. I think it's lamentable that, and then you mentioned history earlier. I really think that when people look back at things like this, look back at the way in which in 21st century Europe we regarded people and victims of victims of sexual violence as being just sort of easily counted up as just collateral to the prevailing ideology. I think we'll look back on that with not just bewilderment, but serious judgment.
Yes, let's hope so. Let's hope there's some lessons learned, because in the UK, it doesn't appear to be the case. Douglas Murray, thank you so much for your time tonight.
It's a great pleasure as always. Thank you.